Some nights change everything, some sounds you never forget, and some secrets demand justice. This is the story of three children who witnessed the unthinkable, and the 7-year journey that led them back to face their darkest nightmare. Before we begin, I want you to imagine something. Imagine you're 15 years old, it's past midnight. You hear sounds from downstairs that make your blood run cold. What would you do? Keep that thought, because tonight you're about to find out what Sarah, Michael, and Emma did, and what it cost them. It was October 15th, 2016, a Tuesday night in suburban Ohio. The Henderson family lived in a 2-story colonial house on Maple Street. From the outside, they looked perfect. Inside was a different story. Sarah Henderson, 17 years old, honor roll student, captain of the debate team. She'd been the protector of her younger siblings for as long as she could remember. Michael, 15, quiet but fiercely loyal. And Emma, sweet Emma, just 11 years old, with eyes that saw too much and a smile that was becoming rarer by the day. Their father, David Henderson, was a respected insurance agent, coached Little League on weekends, went to church every Sunday. But behind closed doors, David Henderson was a monster wearing a mask. Sarah woke first. It was 2:47 a.m. She'd always been a light sleeper, a survival instinct she'd developed over years of listening for danger. But this was different. She crept down the stairs barefoot, her heart hammering against her ribs. Each step felt like walking toward hell itself, and when she reached the bottom, there he was, their father, on top of their mother, his hands wrapped around her throat like a vice. But his face was calm, almost peaceful, like he was tucking her into bed instead of. Linda Henderson's eyes were wide with terror. Her lips were turning blue. Her fingers clawed desperately at his hands, but he was too strong, too determined. Michael appeared beside Sarah, drawn by the same sounds. 15 years old, and he was watching his father murder his mother. His legs felt like concrete, his voice trapped in his throat. And Emma, little Emma, stood frozen on the stairwell, one small hand gripping the railing, the other pressed over her mouth to keep from screaming. Her young mind couldn't process what she was seeing, but her body knew. Her body knew to be afraid. Linda Henderson died at 2:51 a.m. 4 minutes that felt like 4 hours. 4 minutes that would haunt 3 children for the rest of their lives. But here's what saved them: Sarah's instincts. While Michael stood paralyzed and Emma trembled in the shadows, Sarah grabbed her brother's wrist and whispered urgently to Michael that they had to go now. They ran. Out the back door, through the woods, Emma's small hand clutched in Sarah's. They ran until their lungs burned and their feet bled. They ran until the house was just a distant light behind them. They never looked back, not once. What do you do when your whole world collapses in 4 minutes? When calling the police means explaining why you didn't try to save your mother? When home becomes the most dangerous place on earth? Sarah, Michael, and Emma disappeared, 3 teenagers vanishing into the American landscape like ghosts. They changed their names. Sarah became Jennifer Walsh, Michael became David Chen, and Emma became Lily Santos. They found Millbrook, Montana, population 847, the kind of town where people minded their own business and strangers could blend in if they kept their heads down. Sarah got a job at the local diner. Michael worked construction, and Emma never spoke again, not one word in 7 years. That night stole her voice like it stole everything else. But she found another way to communicate. She drew. Hour after hour, day after day, Emma filled sketchbook after sketchbook. But these weren't the drawings of a normal child. These were windows into trauma itself. Eyes watching from inside walls, blood dripping from ceiling fans, shadows standing at the foot of beds, and always the same face, their father's face, smiling that calm, peaceful smile. The therapist in town, Dr. Martinez, called it artistic expression of unresolved trauma. Sarah called it Emma's way of keeping the demons outside instead of letting them consume her from within. For 7 years they built a life, not a happy life, not the life they should have had, but they were alive, they were together, and most importantly, they were safe. Or so they thought. April 3rd, 2023. Emma, now 18, was finishing her senior year of high school. She'd been accepted to art school in Denver. For the first time in 7 years, the future felt possible. She left school at 3:15 p.m. just like every other day. She should have been home by 3:45. Sarah always counted the minutes, 29 minutes and 53 seconds door to door. 4:00 p.m. came and went. Then 4:30. By 5:00, Sarah was running through the streets of Millbrook, checking every corner, every shop, every friend's house. She found it at 5:23 p.m. Emma's sketchbook lying open on the sidewalk 3 blocks from school, but this wasn't dropped by accident. This was left deliberately. The last drawing was different from all the others. Crystal clear, photorealistic, a silver sedan with tinted windows, and in the driver's seat smiling through the rolled-down window. David Henderson, their father. After 7 years, he'd found them. Sarah and Michael didn't call the police. How could they? "Hello, officer, our father who we never reported for murdering our mother 7 years ago has kidnapped our sister." No, this was family business, and family business stays in the family. They spread Emma's sketchbooks across the kitchen table. 7 years of drawings, hundreds of images of trauma and fear, but now they realized something incredible. Emma hadn't just been processing her trauma, she'd been preparing. Hidden in the margins were numbers, coordinates, landmarks, street signs. Emma had been mapping their father's movements for months, maybe years. She'd known he was coming and she'd been ready. The trail led north, past the town limits, past the county line, deep into the Montana wilderness where cell towers disappeared and roads became suggestions. They drove for 2 hours following Emma's cryptic map. Sarah behind the wheel, knuckles white, jaw clenched. Michael in the passenger seat, checking and rechecking the hunting knife he'd bought 3 years ago, just in case this day ever came. The cabin appeared like something from a nightmare, half-collapsed, covered in moss and decay. The kind of place that existed off all maps, known only to those who needed to disappear completely. The smell hit them first, rot and rust and something else, something that made their stomachs turn and their instincts scream, run. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs. Their photographs. School pictures, candid shots, images taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. 7 years of surveillance. 7 years of hunting. Then they heard it, soft, rhythmic scratching, like a pencil on paper, coming from beneath their feet. The hatch was hidden under a moth-eaten rug, bolted shut with a padlock that looked older than the cabin itself. Michael broke it with 3 swings of a rusted crowbar. Emma sat in the dirt 8 feet below, surrounded by torn papers and broken pencils. She was drawing even now, always drawing. And on the wall behind her, scratched deep into the wood with her own fingernails, were the words, "Help Emmy." Sarah dropped to her knees at the edge of the hole, reaching for her sister. Michael stepped forward to help, and that's when the trap sprung. The cabin door slammed shut behind them. The lock clicked with finality, and from the shadows stepped David Henderson. 7 years older but somehow unchanged. That same calm expression, that same peaceful smile, like no time had passed at all. He spoke as if they were meeting for lunch, saying how he knew they'd come back, that he always knew. That they were his children, and they always were. Like he hadn't murdered their mother. Like he hadn't hunted them across 7 states in 7 years. He told them he'd missed them so much, that they had so much catching up to do, speaking like they were planning a family reunion instead of confronting a murderer. Michael didn't wait for more words. 15-year-old Michael had been paralyzed by fear. 22-year-old Michael had been forged by 7 years of rage. The fight was brutal. No rules, no mercy. Just 7 years of suppressed fury unleashed in a small, rotting room. Michael swung the crowbar like a man possessed. Sarah grabbed anything she could find, a broken chair leg, a shard of glass. But David Henderson laughed, even with blood streaming from a broken nose, even with his ribs cracking under their assault. He laughed like it was all a wonderful game, calling Michael his boy, his little fighter, as if this brutal violence was just another twisted family moment. When they finally pinned him down, breathing hard, faces covered in blood, Sarah stood over him with the crowbar raised high, declaring that this would end here and now. They dragged him to the hatch and threw him into the cellar with Emma. He hit the dirt floor hard, groaned, rolled over, and smiled again. Even from the pit, he called out to Emma with twisted affection, telling her daddy was here, that everything was going to be okay now. That's when Emma moved. For 7 years, she'd been silent. For 7 years, she'd been preparing. From her drawing box, she pulled out something none of them had ever seen. A blade, long, sharp, handmade, carved from 7 years of rage and sharpened by the promise of justice. Emma walked toward their father slowly. Deliberately, she didn't scream, she didn't cry. and for the first time in 7 years, she spoke. Her voice like broken glass, she told him that he had taken her voice, and now she was taking his life. What happened in that cellar took 11 minutes. Sarah and Michael waited by the cabin's broken window, watching the sun rise over the Montana wilderness. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them looked down. At 6:47 a.m., Emma emerged. She was covered in blood that wasn't hers, her sketchbook clutched in one clean hand. She sat between her siblings and for the first time in 7 years drew something beautiful. 3 figures holding hands, one grave, one sunrise. Then she looked up at them with her soft but clear voice and said she was ready to go home now. And that was the first time they cried, not because they were sad, not because they were sorry, but because it was finally over. The Henderson siblings returned to Millbrook that afternoon. They told the sheriff that Emma had been found safe, that she'd run away but came back on her own. Small-town sheriffs don't ask too many questions when families reunite. Emma started speaking again, slowly at first, then more each day. She still draws, but now her sketchbooks are filled with light instead of shadows. Flowers instead of eyes, smiles instead of screams. David Henderson was reported missing by his landlord 3 weeks later. The case went cold within a month. Some people just disappear, the investigators said. Some people don't want to be found. But sometimes, the people who disappear are the ones who deserve to vanish all along. This story asks us uncomfortable questions. What is justice? What do we owe to those who hurt us? And sometimes the system fails and justice comes from the most unexpected places. Emma's 7 years of silence weren't weakness. They were preparation. Her art wasn't just therapy. It was a weapon forged in trauma and sharpened by determination. The silent witness became the final judge. And sometimes, that's exactly how justice should be served. What did you think of this psychological thriller? Did Emma's transformation from victim to survivor give you chills? Her 7 years of silence weren't weakness. They were preparation for the moment she would finally get justice. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Are you listening from your hometown during a late-night drive, or maybe you're on the other side of the world? I love connecting with listeners from everywhere. And tell me, what other dark psychological thrillers would you like to hear? Should I dive into more stories about justice, revenge, or survival? Your comments help me decide what stories to tell next. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more psychological thrillers that will make you question everything. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the quietest voices have the most powerful stories to tell.